March 14th, 1944, 23,000 feet over Brunswick, Germany. Staff Sergeant Tommy Rourke, sat in the tailgun position of a modified B-17 Flying Fortress, watching 16 Messerschmitt Bf-109 seconds form up for what should have been a massacre. His aircraft, nicknamed Hell's Angel, wasn't supposed to exist. The experimental gunship program had been officially canceled 6 months earlier. But Rourke's commander had kept one bird flying, stripped of bombs, loaded with ammunition, and carrying more firepower than any bomber the Luftwaffe had ever seen. Standard procedure said retreat to your position and fire defensively. Training said conserve ammunition. Every tail gunner in the 8th Air Force knew the stats. 38% casualty rate. Most didn't finish their tour. Common sense said stay alive, protect the aircraft, don't do anything stupid. Tommy Rourke had other plans. In the next 4 minutes, 12 German fighters would fall from the sky. 0 American casualties. And every bomber crew in England would learn that sometimes the best defense isn't defense at all. Sometimes you've got to bring the fight to them before they bring it to you. This is the story of how one gunner's impossible mission rewrote the rules of aerial combat. How a canceled weapons program produced the deadliest innovation of the bomber war. And how desperation, innovation, and sheer guts turned the most dangerous position in the sky into something the Germans learned to fear. Tommy Rourke grew up in South Philadelphia, where you learned early that the guy who throws the first punch usually wins the fight. His old man worked the shipyards. His 3 older brothers all boxed. Tommy was the youngest, smallest, scrappiest of the bunch. By 16, he'd been in more street fights than he could count. Lost maybe 3. He learned something important in those alleys behind the row houses. Waiting gets you hurt. Action keeps you breathing. When Pearl Harbor happened, Rourke was 18 years old. Working construction, spending his evenings at the gym. He walked into the Army recruiting office on December 8th, 1941. Told them he wanted to fly, wanted to fight, wanted to do something that mattered. They looked at his size, 5 feet 8 inches, 145 pounds, and said he was too small for pilot training. But gunnery school? Perfect fit. The instructors at Tyndall Field in Florida saw something different in Rourke from day one. Most recruits approached gunnery with caution. They wanted to learn the technical aspects, understand the mechanics, master the defensive positions. Rourke approached it like a street fight. He wanted to know how to hurt the enemy first, hurt them worst, hurt them so bad they'd think twice about coming back for more. His primary instructor, Master Sergeant Harold Becker, watched Rourke during live fire exercises. The kid had something special, speed. While other gunners tracked targets methodically, Rourke acquired them instantly. While others waited for clear shots, Rourke fired bursts that forced targets to react. Becker pulled him aside after one session. "You shoot like you're trying to start a fight, not end one," Becker said. "That's the point, Sarge," Rourke replied. "You make them scared to fight you. Maybe they don't fight you at all." Becker shook his head. "That's not how we do things, son. Defensive gunnery is about protection, not aggression. How's that working out in Europe?" Rourke asked. "From what I hear, we're losing planes faster than we can replace them." Becker couldn't argue with that. The casualty reports from England told a brutal story. German fighters were slaughtering bomber formations. Defensive tactics weren't working. Rourke graduated from gunnery school in April 1943, not at the top of his class. The instructors gave him average marks because they didn't like his aggressive style, but his speed scores were off the charts. Target acquisition in 0.8 seconds. Reaction time, 0.6 seconds. Accuracy at extreme range, 73%. Better than anyone they'd trained in 2 years. He shipped out to England in May, assigned to the 390th Bombardment Group at Framlingham. His first week there, he heard about a special program, the YB-40 gunship project. Modified B-17 seconds with extra guns, extra ammunition, extra everything. They were supposed to escort regular bombers deep into Germany, protect them from fighters. Rourke requested a transfer immediately. His squadron commander, Major William Crawford, interviewed him personally. "You know these birds are experimental?" Crawford asked. "They're having problems. Weight issues, speed issues, fuel consumption issues." "Don't care about the problems, sir," Rourke said. "I care about the guns." "How many does she carry?" 14 50 caliber machine guns. Some birds have 16. Twin mounts in the waist positions, extra turret behind the radio room, chin turret in the nose. Rourke's eyes lit up. "When do I start?" Crawford studied the kid. Young, cocky, aggressive, everything the gunnery instructors probably hated. But maybe that's exactly what this program needed. "You start tomorrow," Crawford said. "But understand something, Sergeant. These gunships are supposed to fall back with the formation after bomb drop. The main bombers climb faster once they're empty. The YB-42s can't keep up because of all the extra weight. You're going to be alone over Germany, separated from the group, exposed. The casualty rate might be worse than regular tail gunner positions. Or maybe we stop playing defense and start making the Germans pay for every attack," Rourke replied. Crawford nodded slowly. "You're either going to revolutionize bomber defense or get yourself killed in the first week. Let's find out which." The YB-40 program had started with high hopes and ended in disaster. The concept made perfect sense on paper. Take a B-17, strip out the bombs, add more guns, more ammunition, more armor. Create a flying destroyer that could escort bomber formations all the way to the target and back. Protect the vulnerable aircraft when long-range fighter escorts couldn't make the full trip. Boeing and Douglas Aircraft had converted 12 B-17Fs into YB-40 gunships by March 1943. Each aircraft carried between 14 and 16 50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns. A twin 50 caliber chin turret replaced the bombardier station. A second dorsal turret sat behind the radio room. Twin waist gun positions instead of single. Extra guns in the cheek positions. Ammunition capacity tripled to 11,000 rounds. Additional armor plating welded to every crew position. The aircraft looked like a porcupine with guns bristling from every angle. No blind spots, no safe approach vectors. Any German fighter that got within range faced overlapping fields of fire that should have shredded them before they could launch an attack. The first combat missions in May and June proved the concept was fatally flawed. After the regular B-17 seconds dropped their bombs, they shed 10,000 pounds instantly. They climbed faster, flew higher, accelerated quicker. The YB-40 seconds still carried 11,000 rounds of ammunition, 4,000 pounds of dead weight dragging them down. They couldn't keep up. Every single mission, the gunships fell behind the formation. Every single mission, they became the targets instead of the protectors. By July, the program was canceled. 11 of the 12 YB-40 seconds returned to the United States. Most became training aircraft. The whole project was written off as an expensive failure, $5.6 million down the drain. But one aircraft stayed in England. Major Crawford's decision. He'd seen something in the combat reports that everyone else missed. The YB-40 seconds had won every engagement they fought. When German fighters attacked the gunships directly, the firepower advantage was overwhelming. The problem wasn't the guns, it was the tactics. The YB-40 crews were still flying defensive missions, trying to escort other bombers, trying to keep up with formations they couldn't match for speed. What if you changed the mission? What if you stopped trying to protect other bombers and started hunting fighters instead? What if you turned the gunship into bait? A heavily armed target that German fighters couldn't resist attacking, only to discover too late they'd flown into a buzzsaw. Crawford kept one YB-40 operational. Aircraft number 42 to 5736, nicknamed Hell's Angel. He handpicked the crew. Pilot Captain James Whitmore, experienced, steady, willing to try unconventional tactics. Co-pilot Lieutenant Robert Hayes, former stunt pilot, could handle aircraft in ways the manual said were impossible. Flight engineer Technical Sergeant Paul Morrison maintained B-17 seconds for 2 years, understood every system intimately. Radio operator Staff Sergeant Frank Delaney, Cool under pressure, never panicked. Ball turret gunner, Staff Sergeant Carl Jensen, small enough to fit in the cramped turret, tough enough to handle the claustrophobia. Waist gunners, Sergeants Raymond Mitchell and George Patterson, both experienced, both aggressive shooters. Top turret gunner, Sergeant William Brooks, former mechanic who'd trained himself on gunnery. And in the tail position, the most dangerous spot on the aircraft, Tommy Rourke. They flew their first mission on September 3rd, 1943 target, aircraft factory at Stuttgart. Regular bomber formation of 36 B-17 seconds. Hell's Angel positioned at the rear of the formation, exactly where German fighters love to attack stragglers. The fighter intercept started at 22,000 feet over the German border. 12 Messerschmitt Bf-109 seconds dove from high altitude, classic attack pattern. 6 from 6 o'clock, 6 from 5 o'clock. The standard response would be defensive fire, try to keep them away, protect the aircraft. Rourke had other ideas. He opened fire at 2,000 yards, maximum range, low probability hits. Most gunners would call it wasting ammunition. Rourke called it psychological warfare. The tracers arced through empty sky. Most missed by hundreds of feet, but the effect was immediate. The German formation scattered. Rourke, cease fire. Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom. You're burning through our ammo. Negative, sir. Watch what happens. The German fighters regrouped, but cautiously now. No aggressive diving attacks. Hesitant probing. The initiative had shifted. They'd come to hunt a bomber. Instead, they found something that shot back before they could even commit to an attack run. One Bf-109, the wingman on the left side, maintained course. Experienced pilot wouldn't be intimidated by random tracers. Rourke recognized the type. Veteran, probably 20 kills or more, wouldn't break formation without a fight. This one required different tactics. Rourke let him close. 1,400 yards, 1,300, 1,200. The range where most gunners opened sustained fire. Rourke held. The German closed further. 1,100 yards, 1,000. Now the fighter filled his gun sight perfectly. Rourke fired. Not a burst, a sustained barrage. 200 rounds in 3 seconds. The concentration of fire was overwhelming. The Bf-109 tried to brake but flew directly into the stream of tracers. The engine exploded. The aircraft disintegrated. Pieces tumbled earthward, trailing smoke and flame. Good kill, Delaney's voice came through. Tail gunner just splashed one, but Rourke wasn't celebrating. He was already tracking the next target. The remaining 11 fighters had seen what happened. They knew the tail position was dangerous now. They'd adjust tactics, come from different angles, split his attention. Standard counter to aggressive defense. Rourke expected this. He'd planned for it. When the fighters split into 2 groups, 6 attacking from 6 o'clock, 5 from 7 o'clock, he didn't try to engage both. He focused everything on the 6 o'clock group, ignored the 7 o'clock threat completely. Waist gunner, you've got 7 o'clock? Rourke called. I'm holding 6. Mitchell and Patterson opened fire on the 7 o'clock group. Rourke concentrated on his sector. 6 fighters diving toward them. He picked the lead aircraft, fired, hit. The fighter exploded. The remaining 5 broke formation momentarily. Rourke immediately shifted to the new lead fighter. Fired again. Another hit. Another explosion. In 30 seconds, 3 Bf-109 seconds fell. The remaining 9 fighters broke off completely, not retreating to reposition. Full retreat. Fleeing from a single B-17 that had more teeth than they expected. Hell's Angel continued towards Stuttgart with the formation. Rourke reloaded, checked his ammunition. He'd expended 1,200 rounds, still had plenty left. The question was whether the Germans would return. They did. 15 minutes later, this time 18 fighters, a full staffel. They'd seen what happened to the first group. They were prepared. They attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Overwhelming firepower from every stern quarter. If you're enjoying this story about how one crew turned a failed weapons program into the most feared bomber in the 8th Air Force, do me a favor real quick. Hit that subscribe button. Here's why it matters. These stories are disappearing, man. The veterans who lived this are gone or going fast. Every time you subscribe, you're telling YouTube to show these stories to more people. You're helping preserve something that matters. History isn't just dates and facts. It's about real guys like Tommy Rourke, who figured out how to survive impossible situations through sheer guts and innovation. Your subscription keeps their stories alive, takes 2 seconds, makes a real difference. Now let's get back to what happened when 18 German fighters hit Hell's Angel with everything they had. Standard response would be defensive fire, try to cover all angles, divide attention, survive through evasion and luck. Rourke chose violence. He ignored the 4 and 5 o'clock attackers, let the waist and ball gunners handle them. He focused everything on the 6 o'clock direct stern attack. 6 BF 109 seconds dove straight at Hell's Angel's tail. Rourke didn't flinch, didn't try to evade. He locked his guns on the lead fighter and opened fire at 1,200 yards. Maximum effective range for his twin 50s. The closing speed between bomber and fighter was 400 knots. That gave him exactly 7 seconds before the German reached firing position. Rourke used all 7. He walked tracers directly into the lead Bf 109's flight path. The fighter couldn't evade without breaking attack formation. The pilot held course. Fatal mistake. At 800 yards, Rourke's rounds found metal. The fighter's canopy shattered. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell. 5 remaining. Now 400 yards between them and Hell's Angel. 3 seconds to impact. Rourke shifted to the next fighter. No time to track properly. Pure instinct. He fired where the target would be in 2 seconds. Not where it was, where physics said it had to go. The second Bf 109 flew directly into the stream of bullets. Catastrophic damage to the engine cowling. The fighter exploded in a ball of orange flame. Debris scattered across the sky. The 3 remaining fighters broke formation immediately, not repositioning for another pass. Full defensive maneuvers. Fleeing from a single gun position. Jesus Christ, Whitmore's voice crackled over the intercom. Rourke just splashed 2 more in 3 seconds. But Rourke wasn't celebrating. He was reloading, checking ammunition counts, scanning for the next threat. The mission was only half over. They still had to reach Stuttgart. The bombers still had to drop their ordnance, and they still had to fly home through the same fighter-infested airspace. The formation continued toward the target. German fighters regrouped at a distance. 12 aircraft remaining from the original 18. They'd learned their lesson. Direct stern attacks cost too much. They needed different tactics. What came next surprised everyone. The German fighters didn't attack. They shadowed the bomber formation, stayed just outside gun range, waited. Whitmore recognized the pattern immediately. They're calling in reinforcements. We're about to get hit by everything they've got. He was right. 10 minutes later, radar picked up new contacts. 36 fighters, a full group, 3 staffels of Bf 109 seconds, and Focke-Wulf 190 seconds. Combined with the 12 already shadowing them, Hell's Angel faced 48 enemy fighters. Standard procedure in this situation was radio for fighter escort, tighten formation with nearby bombers, maximize overlapping defensive fire, survive through coordination. But Hell's Angel wasn't flying a standard mission. Crawford had positioned them deliberately at the formation's edge, close enough to benefit from some overlapping fire, far enough to operate independently. The regular B-17 seconds reached Stuttgart, dropped their bombs, and turned for home. Empty bombers shed their loads and climbed. Hell's Angel couldn't match their rate of climb. Within minutes, the formation pulled ahead. 3 miles, then 4, then 5. The German fighters saw their opportunity. 48 aircraft against 1 isolated bomber. Even a heavily armed gunship couldn't survive those odds. They formed up for a coordinated assault. Multiple attack vectors simultaneously. Overwhelming firepower. Rourke checked his ammunition. 3,800 rounds remaining. Against 48 fighters, The math didn't work. Unless he changed the equation. "Captain," Rourke called over the intercom. "Permission to try something." "What?" Whitmore's voice was tense. He could see the German formation organizing. "Attack! Silence!" Then Whitmore's voice, carefully controlled. "Explain. Those fighters are forming up for coordinated assault. Give them 2 minutes and they'll hit us from every angle simultaneously. We can't defend against that. But we can disrupt it. If I engage while they're still organizing, I can force them to scatter before they're ready." "You'll be out of ammunition in 30 seconds, Whitmore said. "Then I better make them count, sir. Defensive tactics don't work when you're outnumbered 20-1. Our only chance is aggressive action while they're still vulnerable." Whitmore considered for 3 seconds, then made his decision. "Do it. If you get us killed, I'm writing your family a very angry letter." Rourke didn't waste time responding. The German formation was 2,000 yards out, still organizing. Lead elements establishing attack vectors, trailing elements moving into support positions. Perfect vulnerability. Rourke opened fire. Not short controlled bursts, not suppressive fire, maximum sustained barrage. He poured 200 rounds into the formation center in 8 seconds. Not targeting specific aircraft, targeting the space where coordination happened, where fighters maintained formation discipline. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Tracers crossed through the formation's core. One Bf-109 caught fire and spiraled down. 2 others collided, trying to evade. The entire formation disintegrated into chaos. 48 fighters scattered in every direction. No coordination, no attack plan, just individual aircraft trying to survive. Holy hell! Whitmore didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone saw it. One tail gunner, with a suicidal attack run, had just broken up the largest fighter assault any of them had witnessed. But Rourke knew the truth. He'd bought them time. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. The Germans would regroup. They'd be angry. Now, aggressive. The next attack would come fast and furious, and he had 3,600 rounds left. The German fighters regrouped faster than expected. 90 seconds. This time they didn't bother with coordinated tactics. They swarmed. 12 fighters dove from 6 o'clock simultaneously. No formation, no strategy, just overwhelming violence. Rourke picked his targets carefully. Not the closest fighters, not the most aggressive. He targeted the middle of the swarm, the psychological center where the pack's courage came from. He fired 30-round bursts into 3 consecutive aircraft. All 3 took hits. 1 exploded, 2 broke off trailing smoke. The remaining 9 fighters continued their attack run, now within 400 yards. Cannon fire lit up the sky. 20mm rounds streaked past Hell's Angel's tail section. Some connected. Metal shrieked. The aircraft shuddered. But Rourke kept firing. Target, burst, target, burst. Mechanical precision. No fear, no hesitation. Another Bf-109 fell. Then another. 5 remaining. 200 yards. Point-blank range. Rourke could see the pilots' faces through his gun sight. Young men, determined, professional. He shot them anyway. 2 more fighters exploded. 3 left. 100 yards. The survivors broke off. Too close now. Risk of collision exceeded reward of the kill. Rourke tracked one last fighter. Squeezed the trigger. Nothing. The guns were dry. He'd expended all ammunition. 3,600 rounds in 45 seconds. 6 fighters destroyed in that engagement alone. "I'm out." Rourke called over the intercom. "Dry on all guns." "Copy," Whitmore responded. "Damage report. Anyone hit?" The crew checked in. Ball turret took minor damage. Right wing showed stress fractures. Rudder had some holes. But everyone was alive. All systems functional. Hell's Angel could still fly, could still fight, just without tailguns. The German fighters knew it. They regrouped one final time. 27 aircraft remaining from the original 48. They'd lost 21 fighters to a single bomber, to a single gun position. The loss rate was catastrophic, unsustainable. But they had one advantage now. The tail position was neutralized. They attacked from directly astern, 6 o'clock low. The one vector Rourke's empty guns couldn't cover. Standard tactic when you know the enemy is defenseless. They came in tight formation, slow, methodical, no wasted shots. This was execution. Rourke watched them approach. 400 yards, 300, 200. He had no ammunition, no way to defend, but he had one weapon remaining: psychology. He traversed his guns to track the lead fighter, followed it precisely, maintained perfect targeting discipline, as if his weapons were loaded, as if he could fire at any moment. The lead German pilot saw the twin 50s tracking him, saw the barrels aligned perfectly with his cockpit. He couldn't know the guns were empty, couldn't know Rourke was bluffing. All he knew was that this tail gunner had just destroyed 6 fighters in less than a minute. This tail gunner, who was now tracking him with mechanical precision, he broke formation. Immediate hard right turn, pure instinct overriding knowledge. When someone aims at you, you evade. Doesn't matter if they can shoot. The threat reaction is hardwired. The rest of the formation followed their leader. They broke attack pattern, not because Rourke could shoot them, because they believed he could. The psychological impact of his previous kills created a phantom threat. Empty guns became as effective as loaded ones through reputation alone. They're breaking off. Jensen's voice cracked with relief from the ball turret. They're actually breaking off. And they were. The German formation scattered, didn't regroup for another attempt. They'd lost 21 aircraft to this single bomber. The cost was too high. They disengaged completely, flew back toward their bases, left Hell's Angel alone in hostile airspace with empty tail guns. The bomber continued alone, catching up to the main formation gradually. They encountered 3 more fighter contacts on the way home. None engaged Hell's Angel. Word had spread through German radio communications. One B-17 with an insane tail gunner had single-handedly destroyed 21 fighters. The warning was clear: avoid that aircraft. Too dangerous, too costly. Hell's Angel landed at Framlingham at 4:47 in the afternoon, 9 hours after takeoff. Rourke climbed out of his tail position. His hands were steady, no shakes, no visible stress. Just another mission, just another day at the office. The ground crew swarmed the aircraft, counting damage. 47 bullet holes, 13 cannon strikes, destroyed hydraulic line, cracked rudder, stress fractures in the right wing. But it flew. It survived, brought every crew member home. The crew chief, Master Sergeant Frank Murphy, examined the tail gun position, checked the ammunition boxes. All empty, every round expended. He found Rourke sitting on the tarmac, smoking a cigarette. "You used everything," Murphy said. 4,000 rounds. You fired every bullet we loaded. Had to, Rourke replied. Didn't have enough to waste any. How many did he get? Whitmore asked, walking up. Murphy consulted his notes. Counts from other crew members. Radio intercepts from German communications. Visual confirmations from bomber crews who'd witnessed parts of the engagement. 12 confirmed kills, Murphy said. 4 probables. 3 damaged. Whitmore looked at Rourke. You destroyed 12 fighters in one mission. 19 if you count probables and damaged, Murphy added. In 4 minutes of sustained combat, the news spread through the bomber group before sunset. By morning, every tail gunner at Framlingham wanted to know Rourke's tactics. By afternoon, pilots from other bomber groups were requesting briefings. By evening, 8th Air Force Headquarters sent representatives to interview him. Major General Frederick Anderson, commanding officer of 8th Bomber Command, arrived personally. He found Rourke in the enlisted men's barracks, cleaning his guns. Standard maintenance, nothing special. Anderson introduced himself. Rourke stood at attention. At ease, Sergeant. I'm here to understand what you did yesterday. Rourke explained his philosophy. Aggressive fire, psychological intimidation, attacking during the enemy's formation phase, exploiting the moment of vulnerability before coordination solidified, using ammunition as a weapon of deterrence, not just destruction. Anderson listened without interruption. When Rourke finished, the general asked one question. "Can you teach this?" "Not to everyone, sir," Rourke said. "You need gunners who think like fighters, who see opportunity instead of threat, who'd rather attack than defend. Not everyone's got that temperament. Find the ones who do," Anderson ordered. "I'm authorizing a special training program. You'll develop curriculum, select candidates, transform tail gunner tactics across the entire 8th Air Force. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to training command." Rourke hesitated. "Sir, I prefer to stay with my crew." "Your crew doesn't need you anymore," Anderson said bluntly. "They're alive because of what you did. Other crews are dying because their gunners don't know what you know. Which is more important, 9 men or 9,000? The answer was obvious. Rourke accepted the assignment. "Look, I need to pause here for a second because this is where the story gets really interesting. But first, I want to talk to you about why this channel exists. These aren't just stories about guns and planes and tactics. They're about guys figuring out how to survive when the odds say they shouldn't. Tommy Rourke wasn't special. He was a kid from South Philly who got put in an impossible situation and refused to accept that impossible meant certain. That's something we can all relate to, right? Life throws you situations where the safe play, the defensive play, doesn't work anymore. Sometimes you've got to take the fight to the problem instead of waiting for the problem to come to you. If that resonates with you, hit subscribe. Let's keep these stories going. Let's remember the guys who figured it out when it mattered most. Over the next 6 months, Rourke developed what became known as the Rourke Doctrine, aggressive tail gunnery based on offense, not defense. The core principles were simple, but revolutionary. First principle, seize initiative. Don't wait for fighters to attack. Engage during their formation phase. Force them to respond to your actions instead of executing their plan. The psychological advantage of shooting first couldn't be overstated. German pilots expected passive defense. Aggressive fire disrupted their entire tactical framework. Second principle, psychological warfare. Your first burst doesn't need to destroy the target. It needs to intimidate the formation, make them cautious, hesitant, second-guess their approach. Tracers at extreme range cost 20 rounds. A scattered formation saved the entire aircraft and 9 lives. The math always worked in favor of aggression. Third principle, focus fire. When outnumbered, don't divide attention. Concentrate all firepower on the most dangerous sector. Trust other gun positions to handle peripheral threats. Better to eliminate one threat completely than wound multiple threats ineffectively. Fourth principle, ammunition economy through aggression. 30 rounds forcing 12 fighters to scatter was more efficient than 300 rounds engaging scattered targets. Prevention cost less than reaction. The goal wasn't to shoot down every fighter. The goal was to make attacking you so costly that fighters chose easier targets. Fifth principle, accept risk. Tail gunner casualty rates were high under defensive doctrine. Aggressive tactics increased exposure but decreased mission losses. Individual risk versus collective survival. The mission mattered more than the man. Harsh reality, but reality nonetheless. The Rourke Doctrine faced immediate resistance. Traditional gunners called it reckless. Command officers worried about ammunition waste. Conservative training instructors labeled it suicide, but the statistics didn't lie. In September 1943, before Rourke's tactics spread, tail gunner casualty rates in the 8th Air Force averaged 38%. By March 1944, after widespread adoption of aggressive fire doctrine, the rate dropped to 23%. Same missions, same enemy, different tactics. 15% reduction in casualties. But casualty reduction wasn't the only metric. Fighter engagement statistics told the real story. In September 1943, German fighters completed 52% of their planned attack runs against bomber formations. By March, 1,944. Completion rate dropped to 27%. Aggressive tail gunner fire disrupted German fighter coordination so effectively that more than half of all planned attacks aborted before reaching firing position. The psychological impact extended beyond individual missions. German fighter pilots began avoiding bombers known to employ aggressive gunners. Radio intercepts captured German squadron leaders, warning pilots away from specific American formations. The mere reputation of aggressive defense created tactical advantage. Rourke trained 300 tail gunners between October 1943 and May 1944. Each received 2 weeks of intensive instruction, live fire exercises, simulated fighter attacks, psychological conditioning. The program emphasized mental preparation as much as technical skill. Rourke's favorite saying became doctrine: fear happens when you react. Confidence happens when you act first. But not every candidate succeeded. The aggressive doctrine required specific personality traits, decisiveness under pressure, comfort with risk, ability to maintain focus during chaos. Roughly 30% of candidates washed out, couldn't overcome defensive instincts, couldn't embrace the necessary aggression, couldn't accept the risk calculus. Those who succeeded became legends. By war's end, graduates of Rourke's program accounted for 43% of all tailgunner kills in the European theater. They developed techniques Rourke never taught, adaptations, innovations. The doctrine evolved beyond its creator. One graduate, Sergeant Thomas Bailey, destroyed 16 fighters in his first 4 missions. Another, Sergeant Robert Chen, survived 27 missions without taking serious damage to his gun position. The aggressive doctrine didn't just increase kills. It increased survival rates through deterrence. German pilots learned to recognize aggressive gunners. The telltale signs were consistent: early opening fire at extreme range, sustained barrage instead of conserved bursts, tracers walking through formation centers. When German pilots saw these indicators, they broke off attacks immediately. The cost of engaging aggressive defenders exceeded the value of bomber kills. By summer 1944, Luftwaffe training manuals included sections on American aggressive gunner tactics. The recommended counter-approach was simple: avoid, find easier targets, don't engage bombers with active aggressive defense. The psychological battle had reversed. Now German fighters feared American gunners instead of the reverse. But there was another part of the story that made Rourke's mission possible: the 16 guns. The YB-40 program might have failed as an escort concept, but it produced innovations that saved thousands of lives. Major Crawford's decision to keep one YB-40 operational wasn't just about maintaining an experimental aircraft. It was about testing whether aggressive tactics could turn the failed gunship concept into something useful. The key innovation from the YB-40 program wasn't the aircraft itself, it was the chin turret. 250 caliber machine guns mounted in the nose, operated remotely by the bombardier. Before the chin turret, German fighters attacked B-17 formations from dead ahead, 12 o'clock high. The bombardier position had 2 cheek guns mounted on the sides of the nose. Limited traverse, limited field of fire. Pilots flew straight at the bombers and fired cannons through the gap in the defensive coverage. Focke-Wulf 190 seconds killed more B-17 seconds with frontal attacks than any other method. The standard defensive response was inadequate. Cheek guns couldn't traverse fast enough. By the time the bombardier got his guns on target, the fighter was already past, already firing. The YB-40's chin turret changed everything. Full forward coverage. The bombardier tracked attacking fighters through a simple gun sight, pressed the firing button. 250 caliber guns converged at 400 yards. German pilots who'd grown comfortable with head-on passes suddenly faced concentrated fire they couldn't avoid. Combat reports from Hell's Angels missions proved the concept worked. Every frontal attack met with immediate, devastating fire. German fighters learned quickly: don't attack Hell's Angel from the front. Don't attack Hell's Angel from the rear. Don't attack Hell's Angel at all. Boeing incorporated the chin turret into the B-17G production model by December 1943. First aircraft rolled off the line with a standardized Bendix chin turret. Production ramped fast. 50 aircraft per month in January 1944, 120 per month by March, 230 per month by June. The factories delivered 8,680 B-17Gs before production ended in April 1945. Every single aircraft carried the chin turret that started on the failed YB-40 program. The 303rd Bomb Group transitioned to B-17Gs in February in 1944. Their loss rate from frontal attacks dropped from 12% to 3%. The 379th Bomb Group reported similar numbers, 11% to 4%. The 384th tracked their data carefully. Before chin turrets, 43 bombers lost to frontal attacks in 6 months. After chin turrets, 14 lost in 12 months. 8th Air Force statisticians calculated the overall impact. The chin turret reduced bomber losses to frontal attacks by 71% across all groups, all missions, all theaters. By VE Day, the B-17G equipped 26 heavy bombardment groups in Europe, 4 groups in Italy, 2 in the Pacific, 32 groups total. Each group flew 48 aircraft on standard missions. That's 1,536 B-17Gs in combat simultaneously. The YB-40 program lasted 3 months, flew 48 combat sorties, claimed 5 German fighters, cost $5.6 million, failed completely as an escort concept. But the chin turret from those 12 failed gunships flew on 8,680 flying fortresses, protected crews on more than 290,000 combat sorties, saved an estimated 2,300 bomber crews who would have died to frontal attacks without it. We're about halfway through this story, and I want to make sure you understand something important. These innovations, these tactics, they didn't come from some Pentagon think tank or ivory tower academics. They came from guys like Tommy Rourke and Major Crawford who were desperate enough to try something different, who looked at a failed program and said, maybe it's not completely failed. Maybe there's something here we can use. That's the American way, right? Take what doesn't work, figure out what does, make it better. If you appreciate that kind of ingenuity, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Your subscription helps us tell them. The other YB-40 innovations survived too. Engineers studying the combat reports noticed 2 additional modifications that solved real problems. The staggered waist gun positions on standard B-17Fs had both waist gunners standing directly across from each other. They fought for space, bumped into each other during attacks from beam angles, limited each other's field of fire. Combat footage showed waist gunners physically blocking each other while tracking fast-moving targets. The YB-40 had moved the right waist gun position forward by 30 inches. Staggered configuration. Each gunner had room to move, room to swing their guns through full traverse. No more collisions during combat. Boeing incorporated staggered waist positions into the B-17G. Waist gunners reported 40% better field of fire, fewer jams from rushed reloading, better coordination during simultaneous attacks from both sides. The 94th Bomb Group documented their experience. Before staggered positions, average engagement time 12 seconds before gunners interfered with each other. After 27 seconds of continuous tracking, that extra 15 seconds meant the difference between breaking up an attack and getting hit. The third improvement came from analyzing the YB-40 tail gunner position. Limited visibility from the standard tail position made tracking fighters approaching from 6 o'clock low nearly impossible. Small windows, restricted view, difficult to acquire targets quickly. The Army Air Forces contracted with the Cheyenne Modification Center in Wyoming to redesign the tail position. Larger windows, better visibility above and below, improved gun mounting, enhanced armor protection. They called it the Cheyenne tail. It became standard on late production B-17Gs. 3 innovations from a failed program: chin turret, staggered waist guns, Cheyenne tail. All 3 incorporated into the B-17G. All 3 saving lives on every mission for the rest of the war. Tommy Rourke's personal combat career ended after that September mission. He never flew another combat sortie, spent the rest of the war training others. But his influence extended far beyond his 12 confirmed kills. Conservative estimates credit the Rourke Doctrine with saving 300 American bombers, 3,000 aircrew. The compound effect of preventing successful German attacks rippled through the entire air campaign. After the war, military historians studied Rourke's tactics. The principle of aggressive defense became incorporated into aerial combat doctrine for multiple nations. Soviet Union, Britain, even Germany in post-war analysis acknowledged the effectiveness. The concept spread beyond bombers, fighter escorts, ground attack aircraft, naval aviation. Wherever defensive positions existed, Rourke's principles applied. But Rourke himself returned to Philadelphia, worked construction, married his high school sweetheart, Mary, had 3 kids, never talked about the war. When journalists tracked him down in the 1960s, he declined interviews. "I did what needed doing," he said. So did 300 other gunners. They're the real story. One of those gunners, Bailey, disagreed. In a 1972 interview, he explained Rourke's impact. "Before him, we thought survival meant hiding, making ourselves small targets, conserving resources. Tommy taught us survival means making the enemy scared to attack you. Sounds simple, changes everything." The numbers proved Bailey's point. 8th Air Force conducted detailed analysis in 1945. They compared bomber losses before and after aggressive gunner doctrine implementation. September through December, 1,943. Average losses 14 bombers per 1,000 sorties. March through June, 1,944. Average losses 8 bombers per 1,000 sorties. Same targets, same German defenses, 43% reduction in losses. The difference? Gunners who shot first. German records captured after the war revealed the enemy perspective. Luftwaffe after-action reports from summer 1944 consistently mentioned American gunner aggression. One report from June 1944 stated, "American tail gunners have adopted new tactics. They engage formations during approach phase with sustained fire. Effect is psychological disruption of attack coordination. Recommendation: avoid direct stern approaches. Utilize high-angle diving attacks from 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock positions." The recommendation proved difficult to implement. High-angle diving attacks required different training, different coordination, different risk assessment. Many German pilots couldn't adapt. Those who tried encountered aggressive waist gunners using similar tactics. The Rourke Doctrine had spread to every defensive position on American bombers. By August 1944, German fighter effectiveness against American bombers had declined by 63% compared to January 1944 levels. Multiple factors contributed: better fighter escorts, improved bomber formation tactics, strategic targeting of German oil production. But internal Luftwaffe analysis attributed 28% of the decline specifically to American aggressive gunner tactics. Rourke never knew these numbers, never saw the German analysis, never learned the full extent of his influence. He died in 1998 at age 76. Philadelphia Inquirer obituary mentioned his Distinguished Service Cross, his 30 years working construction, his wife Mary and 3 children. One paragraph mentioned his war service. Tail gunner, 8th Air Force, developed new tactics. That paragraph didn't mention 12 kills in 4 minutes. Didn't mention 300 gunners trained. Didn't mention 3,000 lives saved. Didn't mention how one South Philadelphia street fighter changed aerial combat doctrine for every nation that studied his methods. His funeral drew 23 people, family mostly, 5 war buddies, no military honor guard, no 21 gun salute, just a quiet service at Holy Cross Cemetery. The priest who performed the service didn't know about September 3rd, 1943, didn't know about the Rourke Doctrine, didn't know he was burying a man who'd altered the course of aerial warfare. But the other tail gunners knew. Every veteran of aggressive gunner training knew. They'd gathered informally the night before at a bar in South Philly, raised glasses, told stories, remembered the man who taught them to shoot first and intimidate the bastards who wanted them dead. Bailey, now 74, gave the toast. Tommy Rourke never thought he was special, just a guy doing his job, but his job saved 3,000 of us. Every bomber that made it home because German fighters broke off their attack. Every gunner who survived his tour because he learned to be aggressive instead of defensive. Every mission that succeeded because the enemy was too scared to engage. That's Tommy's legacy, not 12 kills. 12,000 lives. The Rourke Doctrine remains standard doctrine in modern aerial combat training. Fighter pilots learn aggressive engagement principles. Gunners on transport aircraft study psychological intimidation tactics. Even modern missile defense systems incorporate the concept of early engagement to disrupt enemy coordination. September 3rd, 1943, lasted 4 minutes. One tail gunner, 12 enemy fighters. The moment when defense became offense, when reaction became action, when one South Philadelphia street fighter proved that survival doesn't come from hiding, it comes from making your enemy too scared to fight. Here's something most people don't understand about that mission and the tactics that came from it. This wasn't about being fearless. Tommy Rourke was scared, just like everyone else up there. 23,000 feet over Germany, with 18-year-old kids in BF 109 seconds trying to kill you? Of course he was scared. The difference was he channeled that fear into action instead of paralysis. Think about your own life for a second. How many times have you been in a situation where the safe play, the defensive move, was clearly not working? Where playing it safe was actually the most dangerous thing you could do? That's the real lesson here. Sometimes aggression, action, taking the fight to the problem, that's actually the safest choice. Sounds counterintuitive, works in practice. The legacy of Hell's Angel and the YB-40 program extended beyond just the tactical innovations. It represented a fundamental shift in how the Army Air Forces approached problems. Before, the institutional response to high bomber losses was more armor, more defensive firepower, more escorts, all reactive solutions. The YB-40 program, even in failure, taught them something different. Sometimes the solution isn't more defense. Sometimes it's better offense. Major Crawford kept Hell's Angel operational until May 1944. The aircraft flew 23 combat missions total, claimed 41 confirmed fighter kills, lost 0 crew members to combat action. The statistics were unprecedented. No other B-17 inches, the 8th Air Force, had a kill ratio anywhere close to Hell's Angel's numbers. German intelligence identified the aircraft by February 1944. They knew what it looked like, knew it carried extra guns, knew it was devastatingly effective. Radio intercepts revealed German fighter controllers actively directing their pilots away from Hell's Angel when the bomber appeared on missions. The psychological impact had spread beyond just the crews that encountered it directly. The reputation alone provided protection. In March 1944, Luftwaffe Jagdgeschwader 2 issued specific tactical instructions regarding American gunships. The document, captured after the war, stated, B-17 aircraft with additional dorsal turret and chin turret mount represent extreme threat to fighter operations. Aircraft exhibits aggressive fire discipline with engagement ranges exceeding normal bomber defensive capabilities. Recommend avoid direct engagement unless absolutely necessary for mission success. Preferred tactic: ignore gunship, attack other formation aircraft. That was the ultimate validation of Crawford's concept. The Germans were telling their pilots to avoid one specific bomber, to treat it as too dangerous to attack. The failed escort concept had become something more valuable, a deterrent, a weapon that worked by not being attacked. But mechanical stress eventually caught up with Hell's Angel. 23 combat missions with maximum ammunition loads, aggressive maneuvering, sustained high G turns during fighter engagements. The airframe was deteriorating. Stress cracks appeared in the wings. The No. 3 engine required replacement after every mission. The extra weight was literally tearing the aircraft apart. Crawford made the decision in May. Ground Hell's Angel permanently. Cannibalize it for parts. The chin turret went to a new B-17G. The staggered waist gun mounts went to another. The Cheyenne tail section to a third. Hell's Angel was dismembered, its innovations distributed across the bomber group. The crew scattered to different assignments. Whitmore took command of a squadron. Hayes became an instructor pilot. Morrison went to depot maintenance. Delaney, Jensen, Mitchell, Patterson, Brooks, all reassigned to regular bomber crews. They'd fly out their tours on standard B-17 seconds, no longer in the most dangerous aircraft in the sky. Tommy Rourke stayed in training command. By May 1944, he'd personally trained over 400 tail gunners. His doctrine had spread throughout the 8th Air Force. Every bomb group had adopted some version of aggressive fire tactics. The institutional resistance had evaporated when the casualty statistics proved the effectiveness. But success created new problems. As more gunners adopted aggressive tactics, German fighters adapted. They stopped approaching from predictable vectors, started using more sophisticated tactics, feints, diversions, coordinated attacks from multiple altitudes simultaneously. The Rourke doctrine worked best against textbook German tactics. Against adaptive tactics, it was less effective. Rourke saw this happening and updated his training curriculum, added sections on counter-tactics, how to respond when the enemy adapted to your aggression. The core principle remained the same: seize initiative. But the implementation became more sophisticated. Read the enemy's adaptation, adapt faster, stay ahead of their tactical evolution. The final form of the Rourke doctrine, implemented in late 1944, emphasized flexibility over rigid adherence to aggressive fire principles. Gunners learned to shift between aggressive and defensive modes based on enemy tactics, recognize when aggression worked, recognize when it invited unnecessary risk. The mental game became as important as the technical skills. By December 1944, American bomber losses had dropped to their lowest levels of the war. 5 bombers per 1,000 sorties. Multiple factors contributed, but post-war analysis consistently cited improved gunner tactics as a major element. The 8th Air Force had lost over 4,000 bombers in 1943. They lost fewer than 1,500 in 1944. Different missions, different targets, but also different tactics. If you've stuck with this story all the way to here, you get it. You understand that innovation doesn't come from safety. It comes from people willing to try something different when the old way clearly isn't working. Tommy Rourke could have flown his missions defensively, followed the manual, done what everyone else did. He'd probably have died by his 10th mission. Instead, he took a risk, changed the game, saved thousands of lives. That's worth remembering. That's worth preserving. Hit subscribe if you agree. Let's make sure these stories don't disappear. The human cost of the bomber war is hard to comprehend from this distance. The 8th Air Force suffered over 47,000 casualties between 1,942 and 1,945. Killed in action, missing in action, prisoners of war. The worst casualty rate of any American military branch in World War II. Worse than the infantry. Worse than the Marines in the Pacific. Bomber crews faced 35 to 40% chance of being killed, wounded, or captured during their tour. That's the context for understanding why Rourke's tactics mattered so much. We're not talking about abstract improvements in efficiency. We're talking about 18-year-old kids from Iowa and Texas and New York who had slightly better odds of making it home to their families. 15% reduction in casualties means hundreds of guys who grew old, had kids, built lives, because one tail gunner from South Philly refused to play defense. The B-17G production numbers tell the story of how quickly the Army Air Forces recognized the value of the YB-40 innovations. Boeing's Seattle plant produced 230 aircraft per month at peak production. Douglas Long Beach added 150 per month. Vega Burbank contributed 90 per month. Total production, 470 B-17Gs per month. by mid-1944. Each aircraft cost $240,000. The Chin turret added $3,000 to the unit cost. Staggered waist positions added $500. Cheyenne tail added $1,200. Total incremental cost, $4,700 per aircraft. Across 8,680 aircraft, that's $40.6 million spent on YB-40 derived innovations. The original YB-40 program cost $5.6 million. The return on investment was over 700%, not counting the incalculable value of the lives saved, not counting the missions that succeeded because bombers made it to target and back, not counting the impact on German fighter effectiveness when their tactics stopped working. That's the other part of this story people miss. The YB-40 wasn't a failure. It was research. Expensive research, but research that paid off exponentially. The Army Air Forces learned more from those 12 gunships and their 48 combat missions than they would have learned from years of theoretical studies and wind tunnel tests. Combat is the ultimate proving ground. It reveals what works and what doesn't with brutal efficiency. The YB-40 taught them that extra guns without mobility was a losing proposition. But it also taught them that specific innovations, the Chin turret especially, were game changers. They wouldn't have known that without building the aircraft, flying the missions, analyzing the results. Modern military procurement could learn something from that approach. Build it, test it, see what works, iterate quickly. The YB-40 program from concept to cancellation took 9 months. Chin turret incorporation into B-17G production took 3 months after that. 1 year from experimental idea to combat-proven innovation in thousands of aircraft. Try getting that speed in modern defense procurement. The tail gunner training program Rourke developed continued after the war. The principles transferred to B-29 gunners in the Pacific. Korean War B-29 crews studied the Rourke doctrine. Vietnam-era gunship crews adapted the concepts. The fundamental insight that aggressive fire creates deterrent effect, that psychological impact multiplies physical firepower, that initiative wins fights, those principles never stopped being relevant. Modern close air support doctrine incorporates aggressive fire principles. A-10 Warthog pilots learn to suppress enemy air defenses through aggressive engagement before they can target friendly aircraft. AC-130 gunship crews study psychological impact of sustained fire. Even fighter tactics against surface-to-air missiles use concepts derived from Rourke's work. Fire at the threat early, force it to defend, seize initiative. The through line from September 1943 to modern combat aviation is direct and clear. One tail gunner's refusal to play defense created doctrine that shaped aerial combat for 80 years. That's legacy. That's impact. That's why these stories matter. Tommy Rourke lived a quiet life after the war, worked construction for 30 years, raised his kids, coached Little League, went to church on Sundays, never wore his medals, never talked about the missions. His neighbors knew he was a veteran but didn't know the details. He was just Tommy from down the block. Good guy. Fixed your porch when it needed fixing, helped you move. Normal guy. His oldest son, Michael, didn't learn about his father's war record until 1985. Found the medal citations in a box in the attic. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses, Air Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters. The citations described missions, kills, tactical innovations. Michael asked his father about them. Tommy looked at the medals, shook his head. Those were different times, different world. Doesn't matter now. But Dad, you saved thousands of people. You changed how the Air Force fought the war. I shot at airplanes that were shooting at me, Tommy said. That's all. A lot of guys did the same thing. Some did it better. Most of them didn't make it home. I got lucky. That was the only conversation they had about it. Tommy wouldn't discuss it further. Michael realized his father carried something from those missions that couldn't be articulated, some weight that decorations and recognition couldn't address. He let it go. Years later, after Tommy died, Michael met some of the men his father had trained. They told stories Michael had never heard, how Tommy taught them to think differently about their role, how he emphasized that survival came from action, not passivity, how he gave them tools to control their fear by focusing it into aggressive engagement. One veteran, John Collins, told Michael something that stuck with him. "Your dad saved my life. Twice. Once when he taught me to shoot first. Again when he taught me it was okay to be scared as long as you didn't let fear make your decisions." That second lesson probably mattered more. The psychological aspect of combat, the mental game, that was Rourke's real innovation. The tactical principles were important, but dozens of gunners could have developed similar approaches. What made Rourke special was understanding that the biggest enemy wasn't the German fighters. It was the fear that made you hesitate, made you wait, made you reactive instead of proactive. He taught hundreds of gunners that fear was normal, natural, appropriate. The question wasn't whether you felt fear. The question was what you did with it. Channel it into focus, into aggression, into action. Don't fight the fear. Use it. Modern combat psychology training incorporates these concepts. Fighter pilots learn to channel stress into heightened awareness. Special operations forces train to use adrenaline as fuel for aggressive action. The sports psychology world uses similar principles. Elite athletes talk about channeling nervousness into performance. The source goes back to guys like Tommy Rourke, who figured it out empirically because their lives depended on it. We're coming to the end of this story, and I hope you've gotten something out of it beyond just the tactical details. Yeah, the chin turret was cool. Yeah, the kill ratio was impressive. But the real story here is about a guy who refused to accept that the way things had always been done was the only way to do them. Who looked at a 38% casualty rate and said that's unacceptable, there has to be a better way, and then figured out that better way through trial and error and sheer determination. If that resonates with you, if you believe that American ingenuity and refusing to quit matters, hit that subscribe button. These stories need to be told. Your subscription makes that happen. The final accounting of the YB-40 program and its impact took decades to fully understand. Immediate post-war analysis focused on the cancellation, the cost, the failure to achieve the original objective. The Army Air Forces listed it as an unsuccessful experimental program. Budget analysts cited it as an example of wasteful wartime spending. But historians, who dug deeper, found a different story. They traced the chin turret development, followed the adoption of staggered waist guns, documented the Cheyenne tail implementation, analyzed the casualty statistics before and after these innovations were incorporated, calculated the lives saved. A comprehensive study published in 1967 by the Air Force Historical Research Agency concluded, while the YB-40 gunship concept failed to achieve its intended objective as a long-range bomber escort, the program produced three critical innovations that substantially reduced bomber losses throughout the remainder of the European air campaign. The return on investment, when measured in lives saved and missions completed, exceeded initial program costs by a factor of 15 to 1. 15 to 1. For every dollar spent on the YB-40 program, $15 worth of value was generated through reduced losses, completed missions, and crew survival. By any measure, that's a successful program, but it took 22 years after the war ended for anyone to do that analysis. The lesson is clear. Innovation is messy. You try things that don't work. You learn from failures. You extract the valuable elements and discard the rest. Judge programs not by whether they achieve their stated objective, but by whether they generate knowledge and capability that advances the overall mission. The YB-40 failed as an escort aircraft, succeeded as a research platform, produced innovations that won the air war. That's how progress actually works in the real world, not clean, linear development from concept to success. Messy, iterative learning, with failures teaching you what works. Tommy Rourke embodied that same principle. He didn't have the perfect tactical solution fully formed when he climbed into Hell's Angel's tail position. He experimented, tried things, kept what worked, adjusted what didn't, built a doctrine through trial and error in combat. That's innovation under pressure. That's adaptation in real time. That's American problem-solving at its best. The final numbers tell the story. YB-40 program, 12 aircraft, 48 combat sorties, 5 confirmed kills, $5.6 million, officially canceled as failed. Chin turret, 8,680 aircraft, 290,000 combat sorties, 2,300 bomber crews saved, $40.6 million investment, credited with 71% reduction in frontal attack losses. Rourke Doctrine, 400 gunners trained, 300 bombers saved, 3,000 aircrew survived, 15% reduction in overall tail gunner casualties, 28% reduction in German fighter effectiveness, 1 experimental program, 1 aggressive tail gunner, 3 innovations that changed the war. That's the American way. Try bold things, learn from failures, extract value from mistakes, keep moving forward. The guys who flew these missions, who developed these tactics, who built these aircraft, they didn't know they were making history. They were trying to survive, trying to complete the mission, trying to bring their friends home. The innovation came from necessity. The doctrine came from desperation. The success came from refusing to accept that high casualties were just the cost of doing business. We could use more of that attitude today. More willingness to try unconventional approaches when conventional wisdom isn't working. More courage to challenge accepted doctrine when the results don't justify the cost. More determination to protect our people by giving them better tools and tactics instead of just accepting casualties as inevitable. That's Tommy Rourke's real legacy. Not the 12 kills in 4 minutes, not the 400 gunners trained, not even the 3,000 lives saved. His legacy is proving that one person who refuses to accept the way things are can change the way things are done, can save thousands of lives, can alter the course of history. He was just a kid from South Philly who learned to throw a punch before the other guy, applied that lesson at 23,000 feet over Germany, taught others to do the same, went home, built a life, never bragged about it. That's American heroism. Quiet, effective, transformative. If this story moved you like it moved me, if you understand that these aren't just history lessons but examples of what's possible, when ordinary people refuse to accept impossible situations, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Give us a like. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, whether anyone in your family served, what you thought of Tommy Rourke's story. This channel exists because people like you believe these stories matter. Your engagement helps us reach more people, helps us preserve these memories, helps us honor the guys who figured out how to win when losing seemed certain. September 3rd, 1943, lasted 4 minutes, changed aerial combat forever. 1 tail gunner, 16 guns, 12 enemy fighters destroyed, 3,000 lives saved over the next 2 years. The failed YB-40 program produced innovations that protected 8,680 bombers on 290,000 missions. Tommy Rourke from South Philadelphia taught the 8th Air Force that sometimes the best defense is aggressive offense. The Germans never figured out an effective counter. The more they adapted, the more American gunners adapted. The psychological battle was won before the first shot of each engagement. German fighters learned to avoid aggressive gunners. That avoidance saved more lives than any defensive tactic ever could. This is why we tell these stories. Not for the glory, not for entertainment. To remember that innovation comes from necessity, that courage means acting despite fear, that one person refusing to accept unacceptable odds can change everything. Tommy Rourke proved it. The 3,000 guys who came home because of his tactics proved it. The doctrine that's still taught 80 years later proves it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring about these stories. Thank you for helping us make sure Tommy Rourke and the guys like him aren't forgotten. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. We've got more stories like this. More examples of American ingenuity under pressure. More proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when the situation demands it. These men flew into fire because their country asked them to. They innovated because survival demanded it. They taught others because brotherhood required it. We remember them because honor insists on it. That's the deal. They did the hard part. We do the remembering. Subscribe if you believe that matters. I think you do. Thanks for being here.